Hey Rick, how's it going?
Hey, Imtiaz. Good to
We're
see
now
you.
live. I think this is our sixth edition of Facebook Live this year. And so much has gone on over the last six editions. The first one we did was touching on COVID and some of the things that businesses should look into and kind of spark away from as COVID was new at that time. I think this was around the March, April mark. And we thought it was really important that as a team and as an organization, we would do some research into what we felt the effects of COVID would be. And more importantly, how our businesses could, number one, adapt, take advantage of, and ensure they were on top of their game to deal with all the effects of what would happen to the economy and beyond. So, this being our sixth or seventh edition, today we've evolved so much since April, March, since we first went into lockdown, especially in Canada. And I know it was a little bit later in the US, but so much has changed, so much has moved over the last 6 to 7 months. And I guess today's topic is really about e-commerce beyond the border, and talking a little bit about setting the scene up as to what's been going on over the last 6 or 7 months. We've seen some drastic change in behaviors, in buying patterns, and we know coming into the busiest season, there's so much exciting things going on, but there's also a lot of anxiety on everybody's minds. So, with that being said, Rick, if you don't mind giving us a spiel on a little bit of an introduction on yourself and kind of Pitney Bowes, and let the audience understand your experience and your understanding of this industry, that would be great.
Sure thing, Imtiaz. I've been in the e-commerce small parcel space for a little over 20 years now, and I've had the benefit of helping Pitney Bowes launch part of its international business in the last 4 years, which has been a phenomenal experience. As I think you know, Imtiaz, but many of our listeners here may not know, Pitney Bowes has actually built a pretty extensive international logistics business around what used to be called Border Free. We also operate eBay's global shipping program out of the US, out of the UK. And we account for about 10% of e-commerce from the US to Canada. But I got to say, we haven't really done much coming back in terms of reciprocal trade. So as we started looking at, as an organization, we look at Canada as a strategic market, both in terms of reach for consumers, as well as a source for new products to come into the US. And so, we're really excited about this partnership with eShipper because it gives us a chance to leverage where we already have strength and leverage your strengths to reach new merchants and to help your merchants reach new consumers.
Amazing. And for the new listeners, people who haven't kind of been across the brands of Pitney Bowes and eShipper, I'll give you a very high level understanding of the eShipper and who we are. So eShipper is an online platform. We normally coin it as your Expedia for shipping. We bring together the major carriers in one screen and allow our users and sellers to basically pick and choose the service of their choice, whether it be on transit time, whether it be on cost, or whether they're looking for a specific carrier that they have an innate use on a day-to-day basis. eShipper has evolved a lot over the last 15 years. We were the first in Canada to set up an online platform for shipping. And over the last 15 years, we've really evolved with the times. Our first customers, our sales reps were actually selling mobile internet dongles and internet connections so that they could actually log into the eShipper platform. Fast forward to today, we're working with some of the largest brands in the world, including Pitney Bowes and Google and Walmart, and we're really taking the e-commerce world by its horns and trying to eclipse what we've done in the last 15 years. So a lot of exciting things going on the eShipper side. Rick, as I understand it, Pitney Bowes has 100-year heritage in this industry. What is the kind of background to what has been an area of growth for you, an area of innovation? I see that you're a VP in development as well as innovation. What are kind of the things that stand out for you in the last 5 to 10 years that Pitney Bowes has done really, really well?
Well, like most 100-year-old companies who are still alive and kicking, you have to make bets on certain things. We've been a proud partner of the United States Postal Service for over 100 years now. And about 6 or 7 years ago, we started to make the shift to really focus our business more on e-commerce, on parcel logistics and shipping, because there's strong adjacency to mail, right? A lot of things are very similar there. Fast forward to today, we operate a digital as well as a physical logistics parcel and mail solution. So we account for about $17 billion in revenue for the United States Postal Service, from postage meters to pre-sort mail to parcels where we touch the package and deliver it, as well as our digital relationships with companies like eBay, PayPal, Etsy, as well as technology solutions around shipping that we stand up for companies like Google and others. And it's not just the United States Postal Service we work with. We're a Diamond certified partner with FedEx. We are also, a proud partner of UPS and Canada Post, Royal Mail, many other carriers around the world. Our focus has really been, especially in the last 5 years, digging into that e-commerce space. And so we do the digital. Hey, you need to ship something priority mail, or you need to use FedEx, where we don't necessarily touch the package. We handle those day in and day out. But we also do parcel consolidation and zone skipping. So we've built a network that leverages our pre-sort mail network. We've also acquired a business called Nugistics that many of your merchants may have heard of. And this allows us to bring lower cost solutions to the US market, and it leverages the economies of scale that we have. So we've really invested in that. And what's been crazy is, if you look at our marketplace business, it's up over 90% year over year. If you look at our shipping API business with technology platforms, up over 120% year over year. If you look at our physical logistics network, where we're touching a package, and we're doing about 400 million parcels a year through that network, it's doubled year over year. Wow. In terms of volume. So it's just like everybody, we're seeing phenomenal growth. We're seeing strong appetite for the products we bring to the market, and we see a lot of opportunity. And I think that the one thing that, we're on a journey like you are, but one of the things that really stand out about that journey is we're really focused on the consumer experience. And so part of what, when you operate a business as a merchant, you've got to think about some really basic things. How do I reach my consumer? How do I get the product to the consumer? But one of the things we'll dive into here is what happens once you've reached them. How do you manage that experience? If you spend $10 to acquire a merchant through Facebook advertising or Instagram advertising, most likely you're going to have 10 opportunities to sell products to that customer.
Yeah.
1 out of 4 of those products you buy is going to be a return. That's a typical average. If you have a lousy post-purchase experience, you're going to lose that customer and they're never going to come back. And you're going to lose out on those other 8 selling opportunities. So you've already spent the money to acquire the customer. You want to make sure you're setting expectations, meeting those expectations, and delivering packages on time.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for that rundown. It's actually key to some of the discussions we're going to be having. And I think one thing we are going to be touching on a lot is the zone skipping side, and how you kind of differentiate yourself in the market to, normal businesses that are crossing the border and dumping their parcels into USPS in the first mile. So moving on, we've got a jam-packed agenda, and it's very much about the customer journey, about the industry at the moment, and where we are in the economy, the timing in the year, and really some of the things that we're all doing to try and adjust, adapt, and make the most out of, right? So we touched a little bit about our organizations, but I think today's discussion is really about what's happening now, especially from a carrier perspective. You mentioned really, really well earlier that finding the customer is just half the journey. Getting the product to the customer and keeping that customer for further purchases is really where the solutions that you put in play and the perception you build is the most important. There's so much going on in terms of the world today that we live in, post-COVID, going back into the second wave, and so on and so forth. So we're going to really touch on some of the new norms and the economies and kind of making the most out of what we've got. And then finally, we'll touch on some of the solutions that we've put into play and how our listeners can take advantage of it. And we'll touch a little bit more on some of the trends we're seeing and some of the different things going on. So moving swiftly into our kind of introductory slide. What we do know is that the US is a huge market. There's a $300 billion market size for Canadian retailers and merchants to be able to sell into the US consumer. And from a listener's perspective, if you're not already doing that today, that's a huge opportunity. And if you are doing that today and you're doing it really, really, really well, what we found from our merchants and our customers is as soon as they enable a US customer to buy their product, more than 50% of their buyers are in the US. And that's not hard to tell because you've got 10 times the population in the US. So therefore, you have 10 times more ability to sell to an individual in the US. And outside of the marketing and outside of all the noise that's going on from a digital perspective, there is a huge shift in the way customers are thinking about buying product. And there's a huge understanding that online is the way to do it. So from a Canadian perspective, a retailer's perspective, they really need to start thinking about that market more seriously. And I think to your point earlier, they need to start thinking about terms like zone skipping, using infrastructure, and thinking about that middle mile as to who is touching that parcel and how it's getting to the customer at the end. So some of the things that we wanted to really talk about today is, how does a Canadian retailer currently ship into the US? Actually, we'll start with how do they currently sell into the US? And if they're selling into the US, what's the perception and the changes that US consumers are going through today? If they are already selling in there, how are they shipping? And what are the optimizations they can make in their strategies? And what are some of the new things that this type of partnership is really bringing? So how do you take advantage of this 100-year-old heritage of the Pitney Bowes logistics network? And how do you put it in a technology that the customer, whether being in the US, in Canada, or the UK, doesn't see any different? They feel like they're buying the product at the most seamless and simple way. And obviously with a de minimis value of $800 USD per product per person a day, there is a huge amount that a US consumer can buy from a retailer before they need to actually pay duties and taxes. So it's a huge market, huge de minimis, a lot of value in really unlocking the thought process of getting your product across the border and using the right type of solutions to get it there. Rick, maybe you can talk a little bit about the holiday season. We've seen a lot of projections when it comes to e-commerce and kind of the growth and what's going on within that growth. What are you seeing from a Pitney Bowes perspective during this part of the season? And kind of let's extend this introduction to your thought process in terms of the Canadians and the market that they can get into.
Well, I'll apologize in advance because sometimes the way I approach things is very US centric, right? So, and I've always tried to talk about the USMCA. As you corrected me yesterday during our rehearsal, it's Kuzma from Canada, and it's TMAC from Mexico. So everybody has their own name for this. But really, the interesting thing is there are a lot of US merchants who are aggressively competing for the Canadian consumer, right? So that's the reality, is you have a lot of folks there. On the other hand, Canadian tastes are a little different. So you do have an advantage when you market in your home market. But when you market into the US, I think the interesting thing is there are just so many people in the US, right? You've got 350 million consumers who increasingly are trying to buy products. And so I think that regardless of what complexity happens behind the scenes, you want to make sure You're not doing anything dumb. You want to make sure you're not doing anything dangerous. You don't want to do anything that's going to destroy your business, right? Because people are always worried, well, am I breaking the rules? Am I doing something the right way? Our objective here is to remove the complexity. And this is the beauty of what we've put in place with eShipper is we have a turnkey solution. Your package gets picked up, shows up at your consumer. On average, it's a 5-day product from Canada to the US. It's phenomenal. Sometimes it's going to take a couple days longer. Sometimes it's going to take a little less. And we can help you set that expectation with your consumers. But if you're looking at a 5-day product, you're now able to offer something that's super competitive to the customers you're trying to reach. So this is important from a merchant perspective, is you now have something that fits in the wheelhouse of what's acceptable to a buyer in the US market. So that's the first thing, is you want to make it easy for the consumer to see your product. You want to make that experience very similar or identical to what it's like to purchase from the US. You don't need to tell them that you're shipping it from Canada. So just manage that user expectation and then set the time frame. Hey, this is a 5 to 7 day delivery window. If it gets there a little early, your customer is going to be happy. Like that's how I would manage the expectations. But you want to remove complexity both for your merchant's perspective as well as the consumers who are buying those products. I think that's the most important thing. And I got to tell you, I think the next slide we have kind of jumps into some of this stuff. The ability to look at what's going to happen from a peak perspective is important. And you should always be looking at the mix of carriers you use, big companies and small companies. And part of the reason for that is there are going to be delays in shipping. So one of the phenomena people are starting to see, if you saw the Prime Day that happened last week, what's going on here is companies like Amazon, companies like Alibaba, like the big marketplaces, are trying to shift consumer behavior because they know, like, it's not just our network that's up. Everybody's volume is up. The Postal Service's volume is up 50% year over year. From a small parcel perspective, UPS's volume is up, FedEx's volume is up. All of these companies are worried they're not going to be able to handle the volume that's coming in. So they've done two things. The first thing is they put tiered pricing in. I'm going to charge you more when you ship a package. If you exceed the volumes that we've established. So if you're supposed to give me 5,000 packages a month and you give me 10,000 packages, you got all these great orders coming in, I might give you multi-tiered pricing. So you might pay $8 for one set of packages, $12 for another set of packages, $20 for a third set of packages.
Wow.
That kills your margin, right? If you're shipping a $100 product, if you now pay $10 more and you get the same consumer experience, like that's not great for you as a merchant. It just eats through your margin. The worst thing is if you're selling on a marketplace, one of the things that you have to worry about is meeting the standards. So I've sold this product. I've now got to deliver within 2-day, 3-day, 5-day window, whatever the expectation is that's been set, you have to deliver in that window. UPS and FedEx are putting caps in place. I have customers calling us like just frantic because they've got trailer loads of stuff sitting on the tarmac next to their building, not being picked up, being left by FedEx and UPS. And so you need to make sure that you don't exceed your cap. So what's happening is the marketplaces know this, the large retailers know this, they're starting their promotions early.
Yeah.
They're trying to get people to buy now, start planning for the holidays now, start doing your Christmas shopping before Halloween, before Thanksgiving in Canada. The earlier times, that's what they're trying to get people to do. And I think that's something where if you're a merchant, you should be running those promotions now. Try to get the product out your door so you don't run against those tiered prices, so you don't run against those caps.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think the carriers are doing everything they can to mitigate the risk, right? And the caps are being put in there not because they don't want the business, it's because they have a certain threshold of delivery on times that they need to meet. And their shareholders hold them accountable to a lot of different metrics. And then the overall seller or merchant that they work with also has a certain assumption and a certain expectation. And we're not even at Black Friday yet, but we heard that our postal system is already at Black Friday volumes, and they're already starting to put some restrictions and things like that on their customers. So I think with that all being said, this is one of the great things about this kind of innovative solution that we've come up with from Canada to US. And I think the timing couldn't be any better. The first and foremost is, thinking through your business and thinking through how delays can really corrupt the perception and the brand of your business through online reviews, extra calls into support that might get missed because there's just too much going on, customers leaving because they might have bought a pair of shoes from you, it didn't get delivered on time, so they're going to go elsewhere to buy everything else they want, and obviously losing out on those extra sales, and that return customer is reduced revenue over time. But with the solution that's being created and the carrier backdrop, the carrier delay backdrop, this is where PBX, which is our eShipper Pitney Bowes solution, really comes into play and really talks back to a solution that is scalable, reliable during these times, and cost efficient, because we know that all of our competitors or everybody else in the industry has had to take a COVID surcharge, has had to take a peak surcharge. And I think we're one of the only businesses out there that said to our customers, we're going to stick with what we have. And I think from our perspective too, it's really about going back to the client base and saying that there is so many different ways of slicing the pie when it comes to that final mile delivery and that middle mile leg. And so what we've come up with from a Pitney Bowes eShipper perspective is not just a great simplified cost structure and a great custom clearance network, but also that final mile, middle mile delivery is completely controlled throughout by ourselves. And we'll jump into that in a few more slides. But I think the idea is that setting the scene and really understanding what's going on in the background is the problem is here. It's not going away anytime soon. And this is most likely the most important time of any business's year. This is the time that they wait for all of their marketing spend and start to work off of that. So there's two questions that came in. If we can keep this question on so I could try and remember the older one. The first one was for Rick. Is there anything from a label compliance perspective for US standards when shipping from here? So
yeah, absolutely. So there's several compliance things that have to happen. The first one is make sure you're shipping the appropriate products. So part of what we do with eShipper is we have a screening process. During the onboarding process, we're going to make sure that you're moving products that are appropriate. 90% of what most of you do makes sense. There's a few things that could be problematic. Lithium-ion batteries are the obvious example, but there are other things that you want to be careful about moving from a cross-border perspective. So we'll go through the screening process. So that's one step of compliance. Second piece is we're going to make sure that we put the proper label on this. So we're going to get an end-to-end label with an end-to-end tracking barcode. So what happens here is you get to print that out at your facility, you put the label on your box, it comes into the eShipper hub, they consolidate all the volume, we put it on a truck, we line haul it to the border, and this is the beauty of this. We're moving so fast with eShipper. They're picking up the packages. The end of the day when they get it, they're consolidating all that volume, filling up the truck, pushing it to the border same night. We clear the border that evening with all those products, and we're doing something, we're going to get a little detail here, something called Section 321 clearance, right? What this allows us to do is to make sure each product is compliant. We've got the consignee that is the recipient of the product. We've named all that on each parcel. And we're using customs broker who we've worked with for years. We trust, we know they're going to be able to do this job, and they know they can handle the volume. We run right through the border, clear customs, and we get it into our Midwest facility. And from there, we can induct it into the US network from a central location. Now, even though this is a deferred product, it's as fast as priority mail the way most people use it. Because what happens today is you create your label, you take it to somebody, they let it sit in their warehouse for a day. Then they take it to Buffalo. and they bring it across the border into Buffalo, and it sits there for another day. So now you've lost 2 to 3 days in transit time, just consolidating the volume and dropping it off. And also, you're up in the Northeast. So if your customer happens to be in New York City, they'll get a pretty good delivery time. But if they're in California or Texas, it's going to take 2 to 3 days more for that package to get there. So what you're seeing is we've simplified the solution by improving operations. It's much more cost effective than what a lot of people are doing today from a cross-border perspective. And we're giving you a single compliant label with a single tracking number. So you, as the merchant, can provide that tracking number to your customer. They get that consistent end-to-end tracking experience. And eShipper will give you the expected delivery date. Tell you up front, here's how long it's going to take for this to get there. So you can set the expectation with your customer. And that's the most important thing. We have slides that hit on this. Set the expectation with your customer so you can meet that expectation and have a great delivery experience. But and the question about the compliant label is you don't want to do things that are dodgy, dangerous, or dumb, right? Those are the 3 things that you need to worry about. Everything is managed through the eShipper application, through the screening process, the onboarding. We take care of everything to make sure you're moving products into the US the right way. This is Pitney Bowes' theme internally, do the right thing the right way, especially when it comes to cross-border trade. It's super important. So we take all of those worries off of your hands.
Absolutely. And I want to touch on that. So Kerry, just from your perspective, as an eShipper customer, or if you were intending to look into this solution, the label generated from the eShipper platform is already compliant. So we've done all the checks and we've done all the API integrations to ensure all of that information is pulled in. And within your profile, you will have an account manager who will actually take you through that first exercise of ensuring your products are available and are able to go through that border. So there are a few questions and comments here that I want to touch on really, really quickly. The first being Dave Kamara mentioned, penalties for higher volumes is so counterintuitive. Absolutely. It is crazy when you think about it, right? The more successful you get, the harder it gets. But at the end of the day, I think we're living in that time, and it's not something that the carriers are doing on purpose. I think it is something that is the reality of the situation on the ground. And therefore, and that is why eShipper is innovating and doing different things to try and kind of bypass that normal route to deliver your product. So we'll go through a few questions here. So Ravneet mentioned you touched base on Canadian and US retailers. Can you please give us an idea of what are the main behavioral differences between Canadian consumers and US consumers? Yeah, we'll come to that. We have a slide actually just going into that in a second. So we'll touch on that in 1 minute. Hannah talked about competition. So I think, in terms of advantages compared to the current base of competitors or the current base of other people that are doing similar services, and we don't like to mention names because we don't need to, but from an eShipper PBX solution and Pitney Bowes perspective, 3 things are really, really key. The first, as Rick mentioned, is your shipments are going into the East Coast. So if you're going into Buffalo, anything West Coast is going to take longer and it's going to cost more. And from all the analysis that we've done, we know that US buyers are not centrally buying from the East Coast. They're buying from everywhere. And so proportionally, if you take that into consideration, your savings are going to be much higher going into the central part of the US and then deciphering your shipments out of there. So we're going into Indiana. That's one major difference. And the advantage, as I said, was timing and transit time. The second biggest advantage I would say is your product set becomes much more larger. So Ahmed, to your question, and well done, admin, for bringing this up, because this is actually a really good point, is from our perspective on the PBX solution, we have extended the type of product you can ship across the border. So Rick mentioned compliance and kind of ensuring each and every client has some level of qualification before they can ship their product. We're now able to ship things like tea and coffee. Granola bars we'll have to look into, but we've looked at candy. I have a customer who ships almost 500 orders of candy a day in Canada. And I was telling Rick that in Canada, 500 orders a day means you're a super-sized business, right? But he's never been able to market his product to the US because he's never wanted to have a fulfillment house there. And crossing the border with candy, which is ingestible, has always been a big issue for some of the other USPS-based carriers. So with that being said, PBX is able to ship a bunch of food, dried foods, and a bunch of other materials that you may not have been able to ship through your normal Section 321 partner in the past. Let's ask the question, and we'll be more than happy to support those type of solutions. But with this user specifically shipping candy across the border, I know of times where we've been speaking to a client that's trying to ship protein powder across the border, and they're paying $35 to $50 a pop on every shipment because there was FDA certification needed at the border. So we were taking it in bulk and trying to have one shipment go through the FDA pricing and everything else. And it became such a hassle, he just stopped marketing in the US until he found a fulfillment house there. So what this type of relationship does for you is it really allows you to go into any products that you like, get it qualified through, and most likely we can ship it across. And like Rick mentioned, you become a domestic-based shipper. So the whole thought process of, how does this solution really allow you to go up against a US-based merchant is that our shipments are picked up here around 11 p.m. or 9 p.m. every night, and they are inducted into the USPS or into the Pitney Bowes network by around 10 a.m., 11 a.m. the next day, which is basically the timing that the shipments go out anyway. So you're not missing any transit time. You're not wasting any time at a depot waiting for the next day or the next pickup. With that being said, let's quickly try and move on to some of the other slides. A lot of these questions are very much going into some of the other slides that we want to talk about. So, Rick, I think one thing that is really important is setting the scene again as to what does the new normal look like for US consumers? Because if I'm shipping or I'm selling as a Canadian into the US, what am I expecting? What has changed drastically, and what are the advantages for me and maybe the opportunities too? Rick, you've gone on mute.
I think that's fantastic. So one of the things we will do is we'll talk about our box poll. So Pitney Bowes used to do an annual shipping survey. And in the era of COVID, this age of accelerations that we live in, everything is going faster. But in the age of COVID and the e-commerce space, we find we can't keep up. I mean, literally every week, something new is hitting us that we hadn't thought about, from murder hornets to Among Us to whatever it is. There's all kinds of new things that are coming that we just got to keep up with. So we've started a weekly survey of US consumers, and I'm working with our marketing team to see if we can expand this to Canadian consumers as well, because I think it'd be interesting to compare some of the insights between the Canadian market and the US market. But we reach out to 2,000 consumers on a weekly basis. We use a fantastic outfit called Morning Consult, and we come up with all kinds of new questions. So we could go to the next slide. So our objective is to understand what's happening from a consumer perspective, so that we can help our merchants, we can help our shippers, our 3PLs better meet those needs. One of the things that's been, there's been a big shift in the consumption behavior of consumers in the US. So if you look at the number of consumers, this is the first insight, that buy more than half of their stuff online. Okay. Prior to COVID, this was about 16%. So this back in February, actually we did this poll in October of last year, asked the same question. And in April, end of April, beginning of May, when we completed this part of the survey, we found that the number of consumers who buy more than half of their stuff online has increased by 50%. Up to 45%. So we've nearly tripled the number of people who are buying most of their stuff online, which is kind of crazy. If you go to the next slide. The other thing that we've looked at is we're seeing sentiment that indicates that people's buying behaviors have permanently shifted. So we asked this question of, so once we know things have shifted now, right? Like, I'm not on a plane. I did 100,000 miles in the first 2 months of the year. I've done 0 air travel since then, right? And But that looks like it's here to stay. United Airlines said, hey, look, things aren't going to get back to, where we were at until 2024 from an air travel perspective. And when you look at other behaviors that have shifted, when the virus is eradicated, what are you going to do more of than you did pre-COVID? That's the question. So people are going to be cooking at home. They've discovered these new talents. They've enjoyed the family time together. People are going to wear a mask during flu season because they realize, hey, these things, they looked a little funny with the first time you see people wearing them. Now you're like, okay, it's totally normal. I can wear a mask. It's not weird. I don't want to get sick. The other thing, though, is shopping online is really taken off. So people have said, even when COVID's done, I'm going to shop more online than I did before. So that's one of the big things is the market is shifting, and it's a permanent shift. This isn't like a temporary thing. We're seeing the market is kind of normalized to what I would consider to be the normal shipping season trends now. So we've accelerated by 2 or 3 years from our perspective, from our network perspective. When I talk to my friends at PayPal, they tell me, hey, we saw 4 years of growth in 4 months. Right? I talked to one of my shipping UI partners. They've doubled their volume in 2 months. Literally, and this is not a small fry. This is like one of the biggest companies we have working with us, doubled their volume in 2 months with people looking for new solutions. So that shopping online trend is going to continue. And so it's important for you to think about, how can I meet those customers? Where can I find them? How can I deliver experiences to them that are going to work? And the other thing that's important there is people are going to be working at home. So think about services you can market to people that are going to be compelling. And think about it from a Canadian perspective. What are things, you guys, you have a little bit colder weather. You also are a little bit more knowledgeable about cozy clothing. So think about the things that you could market to U.S. consumers that, if you're going to be working from home, you want to have some cozy stuff, especially in this winter. So those are the kinds of things I'd be looking at from a merchant perspective.
For sure. I was actually also looking at the next one down, which is consuming electronic media. And I think that's a really big one, which is around how, advertising on digital streams works, and how much more adverts I'm seeing, how Facebook's stock price shot up because of the ad revenue they were getting, how Amazon's become so much of a bigger player, and so much of that advertising revenue is pushing that number up. You mentioned this earlier, but I think it's such a change as well. People are working from home, and that's at 19%. People are working at home, and probably having more fights at home with their spouses. Like myself, I get kicked out of the house quite often now. But all of these things have created a real change in people's behaviors, right? So we're like, I'm finding that gyms are closed, so there's a whole new industry for me to go out and buy gym equipment at home. I had to go to the store and actually think about the type of desk I wanted, the type of chair I wanted for my home office, and invest in all of that. So there's a lot of new areas that I would never have shopped for in the past that I'm now shopping for. And I think that brings us really well into the opportunities, as well as kind of what's changed in the industry, right? So what we're finding is, obviously, more and more people are looking at their phones and spending more time on their phones, clicking through more and more things. So advertising on your handset is really, really important, and having a simplified mobile app or working through a mobile thought process in terms of a user journey is really, really important. So as more people are looking at your product on their phones and kind of looking at the adverts that you're posting, more and more are buying from their phone or going into their desktops and purchasing through there. And so with that being said, there's a huge acceleration in terms of a shift away from retail and brick and mortar. More and more people are spending the time at home to click through and buy product and expect delivery. And so from a Canadian perspective, or a Canadian seller's perspective, there's a huge advantage here to a growing market in an industry or in a market that you may have already been in or are going into, and thinking about that solution of how your product gets there is extremely important. I have stats of department stores are expected to decline by over 60%. And so as people stop shopping in stores, they're buying online, right? And if they're buying online, there needs to be a way for you to send that product out. Now, they could be buying from US-based sellers, but they're more likely and more thought process is on who is giving me the product, how different is that product, and is it the same type of thought process when it comes to delivery for me? If it is, it's a no-brainer for a Canadian. They're now going punch for punch with a US merchant and being able to win in most cases because the pricing is in Canadian dollars, and they're saving 30% off the bat. So I think from that perspective, it kind of takes us into the next stage, which is thinking about the clearance part. So a lot of anxiety comes in when a Canadian has to cross a border and go into a new market. How does that all work? How does this Pitney Bowes eShipper relationship really help you to move your parcels across the border and make it really simple so that your consumer doesn't even know you're a Canadian-based merchant? They feel like they're just buying in country. So if we can move over to the next slides, I think what's important is we start to really think about some of the thought process of the Section 321, the FDA process. And before we get into that, I know, Rick, you had some more slides here. This is all from your box poll research. Do you want to jump into any of this before we move on to Section 321 and FDA?
I can just cover it really quickly. So the number one thing you're going to get is, where's my package? Set the expectation, tell your customer when your thing's coming, send a follow-up email if you want to. Don't kill people with tracking. Don't overwhelm them, because the other side of it is people are actually, if you go to the next slide, people are overwhelmed with too much tracking information. So you want to strike the right balance with your customers and give them appropriate updates. The other thing that's happened is if you look at, we did some surveys on what's considered acceptable. So there's two things you can be thinking about, and I think this probably applies to Canadian consumers as well. But we're spending a lot more time at home now. And ironically, if you look at what Amazon had done, they set this expectations that everything should be freer and faster, right? And we were all being compelled to get to next day shipping. What's actually happened in this pandemic in the American market is people are willing to accept stuff getting there a little bit slower, except for food. Right now, everybody's doing Instacart. They want the 2-hour delivery for their food. But other than food, every other major product category from a retail perspective, consumers are fine. What's considered fast is about 20% slower. What's considered acceptable is about 23% slower. And what's more interesting is if you do have somebody who wants something more quickly, 2 out of 3 customers are willing to spend more than $11 to upgrade their package. So if you're already spending $5-7 for an end-to-end solution to ship to a customer, and the customer is willing to spend $11 to upgrade to, say, guaranteed 2-day shipping, you should look at that as an option. And that's where, eShipper does have express solutions as well, both within Canada and to the US. You should consider, hey, what can I do to speed up this process, right? And so that's just something for you to think about as a merchant. Are there ways that you can game the consumer experience? Because if a customer is willing to spend $11, $11.50 to get that, those cozy sweatpants from Canada, you want to make sure that you're offering that in your shopping cart as an option. So that's something for you to think about, because really, almost anybody can find an $18 shipping solution from Canada to the US, right? I mean, and I'm sure you can find it for cheaper than that. So this is just something for you to think about. Next slide. So we do want to talk about the new normal, and there were some questions around the Section 321 clearance. So part of what we're doing is we're electronically filing the information. So as soon as we load the truck, our customs broker is receiving a manifest on all of the products, so that when that truck gets to the border, it's within an hour, they've cleared the border. So there's no sitting around waiting for stuff. Now, this is why we work so hard on the screening process. And, we have some crazy machine learning algorithms that we put in place for eBay. We've learned how to do all kinds of stuff to analyze the data to make sure, again, you're not doing anything dodgy, dumb, or dangerous. And we're applying some of that expertise here. And so That's the key thing, is that this is a streamlined process. We've weeded out things that are going to be problematic. It should go straight through the border. If there is a problem, we can separate out the things that are problematic, but 99% of the time, this should stream right through the border, because we're doing things the right way. We're working with a trusted customs broker who's experienced in this and knows how to do things always the right way. The next slide I want to hit for a second. I think as we jump into our solution, I think it's important to understand that expectations are always changing from a consumer's perspective. And, you know, we had all been pressed, as I said, to get things faster. And now people are a little more comfortable getting things just a little bit slower. And we'll come into the tracking experience in a little bit, but why don't we talk about the solution that we've got here? Imtiaz.
Yeah. So before I mean, the segue between Section 321 and the PBX solution are really, really seamless. So moving into the PBX solution, one of the things that we get with this PBX, so PBX is a term coined between the eShipper and Pitney Bowes relationship and solution based on it being extravagant. That's the X, okay? But the idea here is that with PBX, you are basically getting a Canadian-based service or a Canadian-based solution, shipping your product into the US at a very strategic location, and it comes with three main advantages. So the first is obviously your competitive rates. Our rates are all in Canadian dollars. And what we've done is the first and foremost, looking at the time period we're currently in, is we don't add a surcharge on peak or on COVID. We're actually extremely competitive on the light stuff, but very, very competitive on the £1, £2, £5, £10 and above. And that is because of the strategic network that we're using in terms of the logistics and PBX's own infrastructure once the product gets into the US. I want to talk a little bit about how this whole entire solution works. So on a day-to-day basis, you're a Shopify store, you're a WooCommerce store, you have an online store, you can connect your store directly into the eShipper platform, and you're able to do two things. The first is either provide your flat rate shipping or free shipping to a US consumer, or you're actually able to provide real-time shipping rates at checkout. And what comes with that is the ability to then automate label printing and be able to generate all your customs and everything else with one click, rather than having to add HS codes and everything else. We've created our technology on the basis that all of this information is already pulled in from each one of your products. The products are consolidated at our warehouse here in the GTA, and they are scanned and picked up every night between 9 and 11 p.m. At that point, as Rick mentioned earlier, all the customs documentation and information is already electronically plugged into our broker at the border. And the broker at the border is able to then decipher between a normal product like apparel, electronics, whether it's candy, whether it's protein powder, tea and coffee. And these things are actually areas that have never been cleared under Section 321 from our customers' point of view. So it's great to be able to now extend all of these new capabilities and new products to them. Once we've got that custom clearance piece and electronic data sent over, the truck formally goes across the border, clears customs, and goes into a 450,000 square foot facility, what we call a super hub in Indiana, where Pitney Bowes is now able to work with the packages and stream it across its own infrastructure in the right way. So great question, Sabi. So why is Indiana a better induction point than Buffalo? We talked about this a little bit earlier, but the fact of the matter is Indiana is most centrally located and gives you the ability to get your east and western shipments at a much more faster, much more cost-effective method. But I'll tell you why this solution is much better than going into Buffalo, for example, and giving it to USPS at the first mile. What you're doing is, on the backdrop of what we discussed earlier, USPS, FedEx, UPS, all the major carriers right now are either putting limits or basically letting customers know that we won't be able to pick up everything at the same time. And as we know, delays are going to be imminent. We faced this during the April-May side when COVID first hit and e-commerce volumes exploded. But what our solution does is it bypasses all of USPS in the first and second mile. We're actually taking these parcels across the US and then strategically dumping them into USPS postal services or postal offices right at the final mile, meaning that we're in full control of these packages. Your tracking is up to date, customer service knows exactly what's going on with your parcels, and overall, we're using a strategic advantage here in order to try and almost mitigate what's happening or the looming pressures and threats of what's going on with peak volumes. So that's one thing overall. Rick, did you want to touch on anything specifically there?
Yeah, and look, as we grow this partnership, we're going to inject into multiple sites. But again, if you look at Buffalo on a map of the US, it's in the upper right-hand corner, right? So just from a logistics perspective, getting those packages from Buffalo to the rest of the country, it takes time. And if you look at what's happening at that induction facility, you're going to see they're overwhelmed with volume. They can't actually handle the volume. They can't meet their service standard from that facility to the rest of the country. So the other option we have is, as we grow this partnership, what we're going to start doing is we're going to start inducting into multiple locations. When I work with large marketplaces, say in China or in Europe, when they're bringing products into the US, we organize induction into multiple locations. So I may do 3 locations, 5 locations. I have a partner who's working on a solution where he's going to sort packages for me to 19 locations. So we have the ability to do that, and we will get to those things.
I think,
as
Rick,
we progress the partnership.
Something we talked about yesterday, which was kind of key in the landscape of what's going on, especially the geopolitics, is that we're finding that a lot of US-based businesses or even Canadian businesses who went into the US because they had such a large customer base there are now starting to retrieve and come back into Canada because they manufacture their products in China, they manufacture their products in areas where they're getting extra tariffs because of the product being imported into the US. And what we're finding with that is that this solution plays so well for them. We had partners that were manufacturing, food or dry food-based products, and because they were in Canada, there was such a limiting factor to them actually being able to ship to consumer base because they would have to do all of this formal entry and things like that. So I think one of the biggest areas that we've really enabled for our client base is the fact that you can come into Canada, you can pay in Canadian dollars, you can be a Canadian-based entity and still have the ability to ship any product under the regulation and qualification that we've set out, and almost act as though you're doing it domestically in the US. And that is such a brilliant part of the solution because you're now not just extending yourself into the US market if you're Canadian based, but you're actually able to retrieve some of that product back into Canada and start working from here into the US again. So having said that, what are you seeing in the market?
Well, I mean, I think you've hit all of the key points. I would focus on, look, what's the unique selling point is one of the questions that was raised here. You want a simple, safe, cost-effective solution, and that's what this is. We've removed the complexity from what you would have to do as a Canadian merchant to get product over the border. We'll work through the details. We'll make sure it's done the right way. That's it. That's what you need to reach customers. And then that allows you to market a product in a way that's consistent with how a US merchant would market to a US consumer, right? Hey, I've got a service product. I can get you there in 5 days. I can get you there in 7 days. You're setting that expectation. You're meeting that expectation. And you don't have to worry about your product getting stuck at the border because somebody didn't fill out the paperwork correctly or you had the wrong form. All that stuff goes away. That's really the unique selling point is this is a turnkey solution that simplifies your life as you're trying to reach US merchants.
And there's a couple of questions here. So Ryan mentioned, I just paid an FSVP agent to ship coffee in a large commercial volumes to clients in the US in order to bypass Section 321. Can you provide an overview of making pros to this move? So Rick, maybe you want to touch on that and I'll jump in.
my trade compliance guy is reaching through the phone and telling me don't answer that question. So I'm happy to have a conversation with you, Ryan, but I suggest we take that one offline because that's it's going to require some very specific expertise. It's not something I want to answer on a webinar. I don't want to point you in the
Yeah,
wrong
so I
direction.
think, Ryan, safe to say that we have a solution depending on the requirement and the type of product you're shipping across the border. We have experience with shipping things like tea and coffee across the border. It's just dependent on how they're packaged, the volumes, and so on and so forth. But you are able to think through a shipment going to a consumer under $800 without having to think of all that paperwork, as long as it fits within the qualified parameters. So 100%, let's take that offline, Ryan, and I'm sure one of my team will be reaching out to you. Como has asked a question here about packages. Will my customers get their packages in time coming holiday season? How does the holiday volume affect the delivery times with PB? How do we set, or do we need to set our customers' expectations? So I want you to touch on something specific here, which is between April and May, where we saw this huge spike in volumes in Canada and in the US. How did PB handle that? What was the kind of X factor for you guys over there that set you aside from all your other competitors? And what have you done since then in terms of investing in the network and kind of differentiating yourself from your competitors?
Well, I think everybody experienced delays, right? And we certainly experienced some delays bringing products in. And I think the headline here is we've spent $40 million opening new facilities in the US. We've got a brand new facility in Atlanta, which is astonishing. I'm about an hour away from our Reno facility, which we've gone through and done some refurbishing to. We've opened up a new facility down in LA, and we've accelerated the investments we were already planning to make on infrastructure around parcel sortation, scanning, automation, and frankly, staffing, right? So we've last year, as we were kind of learning the ropes around this business a little bit, Amazon destroyed the staffing model for everybody because they came in and they offered $3 to $5 more per hour for every employee who wanted to work in a fulfillment center, and that just it took the air out of the room when it came to labor. So we've actually done a really good job of managing labor and getting people on board earlier, making sure they've got the benefits, all the things that come from working with a company like Pitney Bowes. So we've got the right people, we've got the right process, we've got the right infrastructure in place to handle the volume, and I feel pretty comfortable with where we're at. The other thing we're doing is, just like everybody else, the reason why you have these surcharges and these caps is because if you look back a couple of years ago, UPS got clobbered by Amazon, right? Because Amazon dropped too many packages into the network too late, and they pointed the finger at UPS, right? The carriers have a limited capacity, and I know exactly what our capacity is because our leadership team meets on it every day. We talk about it. We talk about how we're managing to that capacity, right? And so that's part of what we're doing is we're managing the volume that comes in, and we've carved out volume for the eShipper relationship to make sure we can handle the surge that's coming from Canada into the US. But it's all about managing your business, right? And I feel pretty comfortable with where we're at. I also feel very comfortable with where the US Postal Service is. We meet with their executive team, we look at their operations, and we can see, yes, they did have some, like everybody, they had some performance issues, especially in June and July. But I can tell you affirmatively, the USPS service standard is back to where it was pre-COVID, and they are totally ready to go when it comes to shipping season volumes that we induct into their network and that other folks induct into their network. If we go to the next slide, we can hit some of these questions because we're starting to run up against time. Perfect. So, I think the big thing is stretch out your delivery windows. Get your customers to buy things sooner, end your promotions sooner. So, hey, don't try to jam in that last set of products the week of Christmas. You're going to have a really hard time delivering products if you're taking orders 5 days beforehand. It's going to be very difficult to get that to your customers. Try to get your customers to buy things sooner. So I think the thing that is really important to think about is consumers are going to be more cautious about what they do. And I think it's appropriate for you to include that in your message. Hey, make sure your product gets there on time. Start your shopping sooner. I think that's really the important thing to think about. If we go to the next slide. So the other thing we've talked about is there are caps. Again, make sure you look at, if you're working with UPS and FedEx, make sure you understand your caps. And this is not me creating panic before Halloween, some scary thing to talk about. This is the Wall Street Journal, Freight Waves, the Memphis Commercial Appeal. You know, you got to make sure you stay on top of this stuff. Next slide.
So with all this being said, let's answer a couple of questions really quickly. So the first question was around tracking. So how does the tracking work with PBX, and how does it compare to other mail services? So I'll answer that really quickly. Your tracking is really mostly based on a USPS tracking number anyway. So the tracking number that we give you from an eShipper perspective is the same tracking number that Pitney Bowes would give you, the same as USPS. So you don't have to worry about tracking. The tracking updates are a lot more often, but we are working on various ways for our customers to see what they want to see. So we have almost 3 different arrays of what tracking a customer can see, because some want more, and like Rick said earlier, some want less. Someone just to know when it's going to be delivered and how fast it can get done. Kerry, how and where do we start the application process? You can work with our sales team, so sales@eShipper.com, and somebody will follow up with you instantly. I had a question here regarding facilities and kind of extending out of Toronto, so going into Calgary and Vancouver. We are at 2 p.m., guys. We'll stretch for the next 2-3 minutes just to answer these questions because they are important. So when Pitney and eShipper came into this agreement, one of the key things that we wanted to do is really do what we said we were going to do well in Toronto, and work that GTA market really well. But the idea is for sure to extend into Montreal, into Vancouver, into Calgary, into the main markets in Canada. We already do that with our Canadian zone skipping service called CPX. And we most definitely want to go into some of these locations from a USPS perspective with Pitney Bowes and the PBX service. So we're 100% going into that volume or that area in due time. I would say probably in 2021, we'll start to give you a little bit more understanding. David, in regards to transit times and kind of what to expect. With transit times, currently, we're looking at anything from 3 to 7 days. And that's basically based on geography. So Indiana being our strategic location, anything around and beyond that point is around the 3 to 4 day. And then as you go out, it gets into the 5 to 6 days. Rick, did you want to touch anything on in terms of transit times and kind of what your thought process will be once we get into Black Friday and peak volumes? How do your transit times tend to kind of move?
We're expecting a +1, +2. So it as long as the parcels are organized correctly, you know, it should be a +1, +2. And, you know, the volume that we're working with you, I feel very comfortable with, you know, so as you said, you're looking at a 3 to 7 day transit time from the US with an average 5-day transit in the US market. You can add 1 to 2 days to that during the peak season. Once we get out of peak, we'll go back to that 3 to 7 day window. And then as we expand this offering and we have, you know, we're inducting into multiple locations, you're going to start seeing that come down to 90% in 5 days, right? And and we're going to quickly work to get that lower and lower.
So 3 questions that I liked here, and I'll quickly delve on them. So what is Section 321? Section 321 is an informal clearance for products that are under $800 being delivered to consumers. We can delve into a lot more information for you, Syed. If you want to email us, sales@eShipper.com. We actually have an entire blog on it. I think somebody had actually copied it on there. So please look through that and let us know if you have any questions. Kerala, in regards to minimums to qualify, there are no minimums depending on if you're located in the GTA. We actually have a pickup service now that is for anyone who is shipping 1 to 30 products. It's actually only $10, and you're able to take a pickup any day of the week. You could do it twice a week, once a week, depending on how quickly you want to build those volumes and get them across the border. If you're doing more than 50 shipments a day, we'll actually come pick it up from you free of charge. So whether that's 50, 500, or 1,000, we'll actually manage that entire pickup service for you. And the idea is to pick it up from you on the same day we're getting it out to the US. So we're not losing any transit time or any days within the border change. Somebody asked, how quick does my package get across the border in terms of clearance? Honestly, from what we're seeing, it's extremely quick because of the process we've created. Everything is done electronically, and once our truck gets to the border, it's a matter of just making sure everything is ticked off and goes straight through. So very minimal time, and we're seeing that a shipment or a truck leaving here at about 10 p.m., 11 p.m. on a day will get to Indiana right around 9 hours, 10 hours. So they're spending very minimal amount of time at the border.
And Imtiaz, there's a question that was just asked, which is how does this compare? This is a tracked product. So just so you know, everybody's aware, like this is a fully tracked product end to end. So this isn't something where it's a mystery box. You're not sure if it arrived with the customer. That this is, even though it is, you know, a little bit more cost effective, you're going to see that tracking information end to end, as Imtiaz hit earlier. And then to the point about right now, if you're in the greater Toronto area, this is what differentiates it from a chit chat, right? You don't have to go drop the package off. eShipper will come and pick the parcel up from you and bring it into the network. And all those details will be worked out. But you don't, some people, we call them the post office people, they like to wait in line at the post office. They like to walk to facilities. Those customers exist. If you're on this call, bless your little heart. I love you people, but there's an opportunity for you to like save a little time, have these packages picked up, especially as your business is growing.
Yeah, and I think one thing to be key about is we are actually going to have drop-off locations as a network in Canada too. So that's not something we're walking away from. If you do like to wait in line or you like to walk and see your package through, we're absolutely going to give you that ability as time proceeds. And you know, one thing to bear in mind also, I think we didn't touch on this as much as we should have, but there is a current process that most of your businesses offer now, which is they cross the border with their own truck and they dump into USPS Buffalo. There are so many things in that process that could go wrong during peak. Number one is there's tons and tons of people at that border trying to cross. Number two, if one of those products in that truck gets stopped, the whole truck gets stopped. And number three, you know, with Buffalo expecting so much volume from so many of these resellers, there is going to be a point where they're going to slow down, get delayed, and so on and so forth, because that's the one hub everybody's going to. It's something similar that happened in the GTA during April and May, which is the GTA Canada Post hub got really, really packed. I think there were 200 plus trailers behind. And they just had to put their hands up and say, you know, it's going to take us some time to get to this. And that's exactly the reason why Rick mentioned earlier about zone skipping and about the thought process of bypassing some of these specific networks. So with that being said, we are out of time now. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, Rick, and I'm sure we'll do a few more of these down the line, a few more specialized sessions. But you know, I think from our perspective at eShipper, we've got a huge market that we want to start to really support and work with and give the advantage of these service to. Rick, did you have any final sentiments, anything that you want to leave the team with before you go?
You know, I just want to thank everybody for taking the time to join us. And, you know, if you do have questions, you know, the eShipper team is fantastic. They're really creative. They're really energetic. They like to look at interesting problems. So bring those to the table. We're happy to engage, and we're happy to find ways to address your cross-border e-commerce needs. But we will always do it the right way when we work with you guys. So remember that. We'll do the right thing the right way.
Oh, perfect timing. Thank you so much, Rick. It's been a pleasure hosting you on our 6th or 7th edition. I still forget which one it is, but it's been great speaking to you. We've had a lot of interesting output from some of your experience and some of the thought process going on in the US. Stay safe. And to all the audience listening in, stay safe. I hope you are well, and have a great Halloween in the next couple of days. Thank you so much for tuning in.